Well, here I am. My name is Terrell Shaw. You can call me Mr. Terrell. And here I am at Arrowhead Environmental Education Center, here on our 350-acre campus full of lakes and interesting animals and wetlands. Oh, it's such a wonderful place. And our center right here, a room here filled with mounts of eagles and woodpeckers and turkeys and coyotes and foxes and an American black bear and deer. And we have terrariums here with an eastern king snake and some corn snakes and, the spiny soft-shelled turtle and a snapping turtle and a mud turtle and a musk turtle. Oh, and there's some green anoles back here. Over here we have green tree frogs and gray tree frogs, and we have a Fowler's toad. We have a marbled salamander over there. And of course we have our gopher tortoises. We have 5 gopher tortoises. That's our rarest animal that we have here. They're endangered, because their habitat, their home is disappearing down in South Georgia. The sandy pine areas that they love to live in are disappearing. And so there's not as much place for them to live anymore. So they're threatened. And even our alligators, we've got 3 alligators over here. We'd love to, and this is the time of year, April and May, when, we would have big old yellow school buses coming almost every day during the week, bringing a load of kids to come out here and walk the trails with me, to see the beaver lodges and the beaver dams, to come into this room with me and see our animals around the room, and to hear me tell stories about the animals and maybe have a picnic on the grounds. Oh, we have such a good time in April and May. That's when we have so many. But not this year. Here I am because of this doggone coronavirus that has you stuck at home and has all of us having to stay our distance, keep our distance from each other. Yeah, and here I am all by myself, just me and my cell phone and the tripod here pretending. I'm going to pretend that you are not there in your home, that you're not there, but that you're actually sitting crisscross applesauce all around me here listening to my stories. I see you there, and I see you there, and I see you there. And I want you to pretend that you're here with me. And sometimes I'm going to ask you to do things that require your imagination. Storytelling requires imagination. It does. So there are going to be times when I'm going to want you to stand up right where you are. And I'm going to pretend you're standing right here, but we both know you're really at your home standing, right? And usually if you were here, it would be almost all children, maybe 2 or 3 teachers around, but mostly children, and they're good at imagination. But sometimes grown-ups have kind of forgotten. They've forgotten their imagination skills. So remind your daddies and mamas and the other folks, the grown-ups around you there, that when it's time to stand up, they're part of this too. They need to stand up. And when it's time to repeat after me, it's time for them to repeat after me. This is storytelling. And storytelling's just a little bit different. You see, when you're at home watching TV, why, you just sit on your chair or your couch there and you just sit there. And the TV plays, and you see all of the expressions on the faces, and you hear all the sounds of the animals and the doors opening and closing and the people talking. You hear it and you see it, and you just have to sit there and absorb it. But with storytelling, I have a job to do. I have to somehow get the pictures out of my noggin and into yours. And I do that by trying to paint word pictures and giving you words that will help you to see pictures in your head. But you've got a job to do too. You have to listen, and you have to take those words that I give you and use your imagination to form them into stories in your head. I want those pictures in your head. You have to do that. That's work, but it's fun work. I hope you'll enjoy it. Well, thank you to Miss Ladonna Collins for inviting me to be a part of this storytelling time. I'm just so happy to do this and happy to get a chance to tell some stories, even though I don't really have children here. I'm pretending you're there. There you are. I see you right there. There you are. I'm pretending. Today I'm going to tell you a Native American story. There's a wonderful Native American storyteller named Joe Bruchac. He lives, well, he's from the New York, Vermont area, and he's part of a tribe of people known as the Abenaki. And American Indians still live all around and among us, don't they? Here in America. But at one time, before the Europeans came, many years ago, the Native Americans were all of the people in America at that time, weren't they? And they lived right around here too. It was not the Abenaki that lived right around where we are. Way back, 1,000 years ago, up until about 500 years ago, most of the Native Americans who lived in our part of the world were the Mississippian mound builders. Now, raise your hand if you've ever been down to Etowah Mounds State Park. I'll bet there's some of you with their hands up. I can see a hand up here and there in my imagination. I hope some of you have. If you haven't had a chance to get down to the Etowah Mounds State Park, get your folks to take you sometime after this coronavirus stuff is all over, right? You're going to want to visit there. Look in the fall when they have their hay rides, because I might be down there again. I've done it about 4 or 5 times now, and tell some stories on that night. That's usually in November, I think. But you watch out for that and go down there and see that. What an interesting place that is. It's the site of a village that was there 1,000 years ago up until about 500 years ago. And what a village it was. Here's how they built their village. They built it right on the edge of their main highway. Now, their highway was not an interstate highway. It wasn't Shorter Avenue, and it wasn't Broad Street. It was the Etowah River. They could use their canoes on that river to travel pretty long distances. And they built their village right there where the Pumpkin Vine Creek comes into the Etowah River. They dug a great big old ditch all the way from the river on the east side in a great big old semicircle all the way around until it met the river on the south side, southwest side. And then they built a stockade fence on the inside of that ditch. It looked kind of like those old Western forts that we used to have. Was that really good protection for their village? It was wonderful protection for their village. Then inside the fence, they built their village. Their houses were great big, you might call them upside down baskets. They put posts in the ground, and then they took river cane and they wove it in and out and in and out and in and out until they had this great big, basically an upside down basket with an opening in one side that was their door. And then they took mud, red clay mud, and got it good and wet and oozy, and they slathered it all over that to close in all the holes. And that was their home. It made a wonderful home. And those wattle and daub houses were all over the village. Then there was a great big old flat cleared area that was called the plaza in the middle. And at the end of that was a gigantic mound. It was over 60 feet tall. And up on the top of it was another wattle and daub house for the chief. His house was way up there above all the others. And he was the one in charge. That's the way they built their villages. And the villages were all over this area. There was even one in what we now call Rome. You know where the rivers come together right downtown Rome? And there's that big old bridge that you can walk across that everybody put locks on and that has the lights in the shape of the American flag on the side of it. Well, just downstream from that is where the village was that had mounds right here in Rome. But those mounds are gone a long time ago. I'm sorry, somebody knocked them down many years ago. But there were mound villages like that all over North Georgia. Those were the people villages. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the animal villages, at least in our imaginations. Because don't you suppose if there were people chieftains, there might have also been American black bear chieftains and deer chieftains and wild turkey chieftains and crawdad chieftains? Maybe so. Maybe the crawdad villages were along Lovejoy Creek. See, this beautiful painting that covers this wall behind me was painted by Claire Howard, a wonderful artist here. And she made it look like different places where animals live in Georgia. In this corner, it's in the area right around here. So she painted Lovejoy Creek coming right down out of that corner there, just behind that great big old bear. So if you can imagine, along that creek, there'd be little rock overhangs. And underneath there will be where you'll find crawdads living. Ooh, those crawdads are such interesting animals. They have wonderful adaptations that help them live. Now, you might not know what adaptations are, especially you kindergartners, but you 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders, you might have heard it from your teachers already. Adaptations are wonderful things. If you look at an animal, every single animal has special things about it. And if you'll look at those special things and think about those special things, you'll realize that each one of those things helps that animal to live somehow. We call those things that help that animal live adaptations. That's a big, long word, so I need everybody to stand up right where you are right now. Are you standing? Everybody stand up. There you go. Now, repeat after me. I said, repeat after me. An adaptation is anything. I said, it's anything. It's anything about a plant or an animal that helps it live. That's all an adaptation is. Anything about a plant or an animal that helps it live. Well, let's think about the animals that are going to be in our story today. One of the animals in our story today is Joegah. He's right down here underneath this great American black bear there. So, ooh, there he is. I see him right there. See him? That's Joegah the raccoon. And he's in our story. One of the special things that Joegah does is that he actually washes his food before he eats it. Did you know that? Raccoons do that. They wash their food before they eat it. That's special. Another animal we're going to talk about today is the crawdad. Now, I call him a crawdad, but you might hear other folks call him a crayfish or a crawfish. I don't like those names. I know a lot of people use it, but I don't like those names because they have the word fish in them, and they're not fish. Why do you call something a fish that's not a fish? I don't know. I'm going to use the old-fashioned country name for it, a crawdad. So this story is about the crawdad villages right along this creek here. One day, Joegah, the raccoon, was walking along, and he saw that water. It was a hot day, and he was thirsty. So he leaned over to Lovejoy Creek and slurped up some of that clean, cool, clear water. Oh, it tasted so good. Have you noticed that when you're really hot, there is just nothing that makes you feel better than some just cold, clear, cool water? And after he had drunk his fill, he got thinking about it and he thought, that's kind of cleansed my palate. I think I'm getting kind of hungry now. Now, Joegah's favorite thing to eat, crawdads. He loved crawdads. And what better place to find crawdads than Lovejoy Creek? So he reached over the edge and felt up underneath those rocks, feeling for a crawdad to grab and eat. But the crawdad that was there, just a little bitty one, saw his fingers coming down through there. And that crawdad has an adaptation too. You see, the crawdad's front legs, on the ends of them, have great big claws or pinchers. And when he saw Joegah's hand coming down there, I'm going to call it a hand. I know it's a paw, but he uses it almost like a hand. That crawdad saw his baby pinky finger, and he clapped on it. Joegah, brought that hand up out of the water. Oh, choo, chow, chow, choo, choo, chow, chow, choo, 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 chow, choo. And you know what he did? That crazy raccoon put his hand back down again. I'm going to get that crawdad. When he reached down again, a couple of brothers and sisters came over there to be with that little one, and they grabbed onto his fingers too. Oh, choo, choo, chow, 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 choo. He's a slow learner. He decided to reach in with both hands. I'll just get him good. He reached in with both hands to grab him. By that time, the whole family was there, and all 10 fingers got bitten. I'm going to beat crawdads. I'm going to get those crawdads. I'm going to get those crawdads. And that's when Joegah got the idea. Here's what he decided to do. He started moaning, "Oh, my belly aches. Oh, I'm so hungry. I haven't eaten in so long. Oh, I'm probably going to die of hunger." And he went stumbling off into the woods. He looked so bad. He was all hunched over, sad-looking thing. And that littlest crawdad stuck his eyes up out of the water and saw him going away and thought, "Oh, that poor animal's not going to live long." Joegah knew exactly where he was going, though. You see, he had noticed that morning that the beaver had been really busy along that creek, and they'd cut down some trees, and they had started cutting down a great big old sweet gum tree. Now, sweet gum trees, that's a good name for it, because its sap is just gummy as it can be and a little bit sweet. And where they had started cutting it down and then they got distracted and didn't finish, why, that tree had just oozed out all this sticky, icky, gummy sap. And Joegah went straight to that tree, put his face in that sap and rubbed it all around his face, turned around and rubbed it on the back of his head and the top of his head, turned around, rubbed it on his belly, rubbed it on his shoulders and his back and his hiney, rubbed it on his legs, rubbed it on his arms, till he was covered with that gummy old sap from the top of his head to the soles of his feet. He was covered with that gum. And then he dropped to his knees and rolled around in the leaves and the dirt and the twigs on the forest floor. He rolled around till he had leaves and sticks and dirt stuck all over him. He was a mess. And then he found an old rotten stump. And he put his face into that stump and bit off a piece of old rotten stump and kept it in his mouth. And then he went stumbling back down to that creek. He said, "Oh, I'm dying of hunger. I'm so hungry. I'm going to die." Oh, and boom, fell down on the ground right there next to that creek while that little bitty crawdad was peeping out looking at him. And his feet went in the air and they shook, and then they got still. His head lolled to the side and his tongue lolled out, and he looked dead. I guess the saying is dead as a doornail. Well, he did look dead as any nail I've ever seen. He looked dead. That little crawdad said, "Is he dead? I believe he's dead." That crawdad jumped back in the water and started swimming upstream, telling all of his friends, "Joegah's dead. Joegah's dead. Joegah's not going to eat any of us anymore. He's dead." And somebody said, "We better go tell the chief." So all those little crawdads started going together. They collected more folks with them as they went up that creek and up that creek and up that creek and up that creek till they got to the chief's village. And pretty soon the chief heard about it and gave them an audience. They went before him and said, "Oh, Chief, Joegah is dead." The chief said, "How do you know that, little crawdad?" Crawdad said, "Well, I have to stop right here and let you know. That crawdad, he was a fine fella. Nothing wrong with him. He's got a heart of gold. But he was like me. He was a storyteller. I mean, what kind of story is it if that Joegah just fell over dead for no good reason? He had to put a chase in it, right? Every good movie's got a chase scene, right? So he said, "Oh, Joegah was chasing me. We ran around. I quick ducked behind a rock, went all the way around the rock, snuck up behind him, and bit him on the toe. When I did, he jumped around, stumbled, and fell and hit his head on that rock and is dead as a doornail." Oh, can y'all hear it? That's one of our barking tree frogs barking over there. He must like the story too. "Oh," the chief said, "he's really dead?" He said, "Yeah, I'll show you, Chief." Chief said, "You better do that. Come with me. Warriors." He gathered all his warriors around him. And the chief and the warriors and that little crawdad all headed downstream till they got back to where Joegah was still lying there looking dead. The chief said, well, he looks dead. Warrior, come here. The warrior, he motioned to, yes, sir, yes, sir. Go pinch his tail, see if he's alive. Yes, sir. That warrior scuttled over next to Joegah, clapped his tail. Ooh! But Joegah may have thought ooch, but he didn't say ooch. He stayed still as that old doornail. The chief said, well, he looks dead. Warrior, come here. This other warrior came over to her. Yes, sir, he said. Go pinch his toes, see if he's dead. Yes, sir. He scuttled over, pinched his back toes, pinched his front toes. Joegah didn't move a muscle. King said, well, he might be dead, but we better be sure. Warrior, come here. Go check out his mouth. His mouth, sir? Yes, his mouth. But he likes to eat crawdads. I know that, but he's dead. If he wakes up, you jump off. Yes, sir. That little crawdad scuttled over, climbed up onto Joegah's chin, climbed into his mouth, pulled out that bit of rotten old stump. He said, sir, there's some rot in here. Oh, the chief said, oh, if there's rot, he must be dead. Let's celebrate. And all those warriors formed a big circle around Joegah, and they started marching and chanting and shouting hallelujah. They were having such a good time, they didn't even notice when Joegah opened one eye, opened the other eye. They got big. He got a big old smile on his face. He pulled a sack out from under it and started stuffing those animals right there in his bag, stuffing them in. His crawdad bag was just squirming full of crawdads. And the other crawdads quick scuttled away. And he looked at that big old bag and thought, I'm going to have me a supper now. Licked his lips and opened up that bag and looked at those crawdads and shut it again. They looked awful. You see, in all their dancing around him, they had gotten all of that gum and leaves and dirt and twigs on them. They were a mess. He didn't want to eat that. He thought of what to do. And that's when he took his bag down to Lovejoy Creek. And he carefully reached into that bag and took out one of those crawdads, and he just washed it real good in the creek, and then ate it. And he reached in and got a second one and washed it till it was good and clean. He washed and washed and washed until he had eaten that whole bag full of crawdads. He'd not had a supper like that ever. You know what? He learned a lesson from that. He learned that if he'd wash his food real good, it tasted better and was fresher. He liked it that way. And so from that day to this, whenever Joegah catches his prey, he washes it good in the creek before he eats it. Well, that's a how come story is what I call it. Some people call it an origin story. It's how come raccoons wash their food before they eat it. And as I told you, it's an Iroquois story from Joe Bruchac. I want to thank again Miss Ladonna Collins for inviting me to be a part of this storytelling. If you enjoy these stories, you can go to the Arrowhead Environmental Education Center and, on Facebook, and you can click on some of the other stories that I have there. I hope you've enjoyed this story today. I've sure enjoyed telling you the story. Thank you, and bye-bye.